that organizations run into in the process of designing and implementing seed interventions. And Steve Walsh took us through these, highlighting those common pitfalls. And just to mention that, of course, most of these pitfalls have been identified by USAID as they go through applications. And of course, these pitfalls keep recurring, and therefore the need to sort of bring them to the fore and attempt to address them together with the implementing partners. And of course, some of the pitfalls were also identified.
Should we take the next slide so they can see them?
All right, so like I was mentioning, some of the pitfalls were also identified during the scale consultations on sea system security assessments, which we did in 2021. And we have a number of common pitfalls, like you can see on your screen. These are 8 that we have identified, but we believe you could be having some more added to this. So I'll just read through them so that you understand what the problems are. And one of them is the assumption, of course, that farmers have no seed, and this looking at all channels. And then we also look at, in terms of crop choice for direct seed distribution, we see that crops for DSD are often chosen like if they're linked to easy procurement process. So we often go for what is easy for us. And in terms of calculating seed needs, of course, there's always that assumption of 100% seed need. And this tends to overestimation of what applicants are requesting for in terms of funds, seeds equivalent to funds. So number 4, of course, we look at seed quality, and often there's that assumption that all seed must be certified and that farmer seed is of poor quality. And often organizations resort to direct seed distribution irrespective of what the problem that is being addressed. And also that responses are often done late, and many times we see organizations coming in with seeds when farmers, for example, have planted their fields. And number 7, addressing low access to new varieties almost exclusively via DSD, that is direct seed distribution, or sometimes the use of voucher, while sort of not considering other options like the use of small promotional packs to sort of address access issues. And then there is often low recognition that farmers are also good seed managers. And we tend not to focus on building the skills of the farmers. Next slide, please. And so for today, we are going to do some little exercise or an activity, and this will be done within the plenary. And I would like us to sort of to just ask everyone to individually scroll through the Google Doc whose link you will be given. Good, I think the link is already there. So in that Google Doc, you'll read through each of the pitfalls, and it is the first activity on common pitfalls. You'll read through each of the pitfalls, think about your own work, and of course, put an X in the column that represents your experience. You might have experienced this either rarely or often. So we want you to sort of give us an impression of what your experience is like. You'll just take a few minutes for this to fill the columns 1 and 2, and then we will sort of converge again and move forward. So with that, I think I'll let everyone go to that Google Doc. Please do it as fast as you can. We just have a few minutes and then we get back to plenary. I think we are almost there with this. Unless someone else still wants to put an X, I think most of us have done so. And based on what I'm seeing, perhaps Ashton, Abby, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm looking at the responses and I can see pitfall number 4, number 6, number 8. If we agree on that, I think those look to me like the ones that happen quite often. I can see number 4, 6, 8. Please just confirm if
Wilfred,
that is
definitely number 6 and 8. I think for
yes.
for 3 and 4 they are even. And so just for the group's knowledge, the top 3 we are planning to go into breakout groups and discuss in more detail. So we were trying to see which ones of these are so common. But it looks like numbers 3 and 4 are both very high. So I guess it's, and number 7 as well. So I guess it's kind of up to you guys if there's one that feels really important. Louise?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. Thank you all for being frank. I think the message here is that most of them are fairly common. You know, that's what I see as I look at the chart, that most of the 8 that Steve mentioned are more common than not. Just wanted to share that remark.
Good. So we'll take number 6, 8, and perhaps go with number 4 for our discussion for today. And remember, we can always continue with the conversation with the others post the session. So having selected those, so we are going with 4, 6, and 8. I would like to take us to the next level, but I want to pause for a second. If there is any urgent thing that anyone wants to raise before we move to the next section, please be free to raise your hand just quickly. Anything urgent that you think we need to address before we move to the next section? Good, thanks. So with that, then we move to the next session, and in our next session, we'll break into 3 groups. Within those groups, we want to go again to the Google Doc for activity number 2, and it's named Pitfalls Discussion. So you'll find it in the shared Google Doc. Once you get there, please find your breakout groups table. We'll have group 1, group 2, and group 3. And each group will discuss one pitfall. We request you to assign one note taker and discuss the pitfall assigned to you in terms of why this pitfall happens, and of course, moving forward, what can be done differently to overcome the pitfall. So we selected number 4, number 6, and number 8. So group 1 will discuss pitfall number 4. Group 2 will discuss pitfall number 6. And group 3 will discuss pitfall number 8. So I will, with that, then ask Ashton or Abby to assign us to the groups.
Yep, thanks, Wilfred. All clear. And just to know, I put in the chat box the instructions, and then we have 3 facilitators already assigned for the 3 groups, Ina, Alex, and John. So in just a second, you will be put into those groups. We will be back in 15 minutes. Enjoy your discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Alex.
Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. Okay.
So I just want to check, Abby, am I the one who is facilitating in this group, or I didn't get you?
Yes, Alex. Sorry, I sent an email. Yes, if you don't mind, if you can facilitate this group, and you are breakout group 2. So in the Google document, we are on page 4 for this group.
That's fine. So I can actually facilitate. So who is going to be our note taker? Anyone who is volunteering to be a note taker? Anyone? Hello?
Alex, if no one volunteers, I can do it for you.
Thank you so much, Abby. So we can go straight to the activity. Just trying to open my Google Doc. Yeah, so we are discussing.
I will share my screen now. Yeah. So you
okay.
Can...
Yeah, I think that would be better. So we are discussing pitfall number 6, which says responding late with seed often after farmers have planted. Confirm we are all there.
Yeah, this is Talon speaking. Can I continue?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Talon speaking. So commonly responding with seed is very common. One reason of being late is the need identification by respective bodies to have the farmers started late, or there could be sometimes a slow process that happens. That is one of the reasons. The second reason is that sometimes identifying a source of seeds is one of the reasons why late response is happening. The other reason is that sometimes the price determination or during the course of action that may happen, the predetermined price and the late final price may change, so that may affect the actual response. The other is on the planning process, underestimation could happen, and the demand and the supply may not meet. That is, demand and supply issue is the other reason. Sometimes unaffordability of farmers to pay, so limited capacity in terms of finance to pay for the seeds. This is one of the reasons. These are some of the highlights I want to raise. So in order to address these issues, need identification has to be as a solution. Need identification has to be done ahead of time. That is one of the things. To identify appropriate seed sources, it is better to establish peer networking with respective seed suppliers. That is one of the best mechanism in order to identify source of seed with the required varieties. The other is maybe sometimes delivering that means the price determination or price fixing to be done based on the actual market price prediction. So price determination has to be information based or evidence based in order to avoid back and forth. That is the other thing. In order to meet the demand, it is better to plan with the supply. So demand supply analysis has to be done properly in order to meet the shortage in the meat. Finally, connecting or providing credit access or financial supply to farmers is very important to cover their financial gaps. So these are the reasons, and these are suggested solutions that I assume from my side. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much. I think it was quite very helpful to us. I think you came up with very important points, and they're quite many. It's quite appreciable. We have anyone to add to the list?
May I compliment small thing, Alex? Yeah, I think the first speaker covered a lot of area. Maybe just we can put it poor planning, which cannot consider the crop calendar of the area, and sometimes long procurement or logistic procedure, which is the real case even here in our operational country, which can take long process. And also sometimes low awareness about the context of that specific area. Some donors or some suppliers are sending less. So those will complement on the why aspect, why that pitfall happened. But what can be done, he has already put it clearly, but to put it early planning with early seed availability assessment, because sometimes if seeds are available in the local area, we can plan to buy from the local community, no need to go for the purchase. So the assessment, or my brother already said, he says need assessment, but we are specific to seed. So let us do the seed assessment as early as possible, and let us understand the context, just to complement to my former team members. Over to you, Alex.
Alex, I had to mute you because there was some background noise. So you may need to unmute if you are speaking. We can't hear you.
Thank you for that. So I was saying, thank you so much for the contributions. I think we have lots of points. Anyone else to add? I also think there may be, one of the challenge could be around delayed approval, because some seeds may require approval from the donor. So in terms of moving forward, we might need to do our early seed assessment or rapid seed assessment, and then make our applications for approval a little bit earlier. Thank you. Anyone else? You can shoot. I can't see the hands.
I will just add one point, the delay of delivery, the seeds delivery delay. For example, if we import the seeds, there might be a delayed delivery with the ship. For example, from one country to another country.
Zoe, did I capture that correctly? The ship delays?
Exactly.
Okay. Elaine, I see you have a hand or a clap. Is there something you want to say as well?
Yes. Just another point related to seed procurement. Sometimes there are a need to adapt the procurement process to seed acquisition that are available with local producer. Generally, the supply chain used to work with very important company, and for seed producer, seeds are available at very local level. So there are a need to adapt the procurement process to seed acquisition. Over.
Thank you for that very important point. I think I may want to add to the last point on how do we address the delays. We might need to facilitate support of these local seed producers, so that we make sure that whenever we want to procure locally, the seed will be available. So if there can be some local community seed producers that can be supported to produce the seed, then that would be a good idea to limit the delays. Thank you.
Carl, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. My name is Carl Wall. I'm with USAID BHA, working from Washington, D.C. And I'm happy to be in this group because this is something I see almost with every proposal and every project that I monitor is the late delivery of seeds. And so I would just, a few things I see, and they may have been stated already, but we say the need identification for the farmers. Typically, as BHA, we lack seed assessment in applications. So the seed assessment typically is not done, or it's proposed to be done as part of the project. And the problem is that, by the time the project is approved, that gives you very little time before the actual seeds need to be in the field. I think another thing that's a challenge is that quite a few humanitarian agencies treat seed as if it is like a non-food item or a shelter or something that you would deliver as a humanitarian good. And so their processes for, I remember working, I know he's in another breakout room, but I remember working for Concern Worldwide. Our processes were oriented towards procuring seed through direct distribution channels, the same way you would with blankets, with medicines, with all kinds of items that are different from seeds. And so I think that's a big challenge in a lot of NGOs, is that their systems are set up that to go outside of those systems is very difficult, if that makes sense. So if I, as a program staff in an NGO, I recall when I worked for Concern in Zambia, to do something that was not direct distribution required a lot of effort on my and my team's part to actually justify that system so that it could be authorized so that we could carry on with it. And that took a lot of extra time. And I think that is very systematic in a lot of INGOs. And I'll leave that one. The other, just one more thing that I would add is that oftentimes people say they're going to get seeds, but they're not aware of what is on the market to be had, and that a lot of NGOs have to change what they're going to get because they don't have a good idea of what will be available on the market, because seeds are not available throughout the year. They're produced according to the agricultural calendar as well. So you're saying, oh, we want to procure this variety of maize, but unfortunately, there was not much of that produced, so we have to procure another variety. And that eats up a lot of time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Carl, and everyone else for the contributions. I think with the few minutes left, we may want to decide who is going to present for our group. Do we have any volunteer? Probably Abi can help in picking the hands if there's anyone who raised the hands. Any volunteer?
How about Elaine?
So thank you so much, said Elaine. Thank you so much for volunteering.
I am volunteering for him, but if he does not want to do it, then I can do it, Alex.
Wow, that's brilliant.
All right, Wilfred, I think we're all back in the main room now.
All right. So I hope everyone is back. Just so that I don't leave anyone behind, I can still see some people typing, but we can
We're all
continue
here though, Wilfred. Yeah.
All right. So I would like to give each group an opportunity to share with us what their thoughts were. So we'll still have the Google Doc app, and I will ask each of the groups, starting of course with group 1. You'll just briefly share what your thoughts were, and we'll ask others if they have different thoughts. They can add those to the chat box, and you can also use the comments function to add comments against the contents of the Google Doc. So feel free to do that. So I'll go straight to group 1. Whoever is supposed to share with us, please just unmute and go ahead. You just have a few minutes, and then we'll get any reactions very briefly again.
Yeah, I'm going to provide the feedback of group 1, who work on assuming that all seed must be certified and that all farmer seed is poor of quality. So why this pitfall happen? One of the elements we mentioned is usually we're forgetting other way to document the seed quality. That is how we can do the seed germination test, the seed quality check before buying it by external actor, and so on and so forth. So another element also, we focus more on paper trail to meet the donor requirements. So when we are doing the design, the project and everything, so we have put more focus on that aspect. And the additional element also, we don't pay attention to informal market systems. So, and also at times we think that we need expensive seed to bring out of poverty. We say, why can't you buy seed that can yield a lot per hectare? So that's why we try to push some to buy a hybrid seed that as a farmer cannot reserve seed from it, and so on and so forth. Another element also, in several cases, we link yield and cropping season. We make more on emphasis on those aspects to create and focus on seed source and seed quality and seed qualification. We say, oh no, this seed has a poor yield. This seed cropping season is too long. So we try to cultivate those elements in our reflections. Wherefore, what also some element has been picked up. So one of it is a local certification unit that can participate in the certification process, rather than relying on very the national level or a higher level certification. Why can't you work on developing that capacity at local level so that they can do it with the local farmer and ensure the certification is done locally? Another element is strengthening local system. That is the cooperative who produce seeds and the private sector, every actor, either individual cooperative that can produce the seed in the localities should be also strengthened to strengthen the seed system. Another element, source from existing informal markets. So when buying, we can also prioritizing buying from the local informal system that exists within the communities. Establishing also specific procurement guidelines so that can allow procuring seed at the local level. Improve post-harvest storage and handling also of seeds might also contribute to having quality seed at the community level. No seed diversity needs of farmer, also another element. Put seed selection process to be placed in during the training or the farmer. When we are training the farmer on crop agricultural practices, either seed production, either crop production, it will be good also to integrate their own, to reinforce their own capacity to do the seed selection from their own production. Agricultural donor might also be open for requirement to include various quality screening procedure and so on and so forth. Sorry for the speed. These are the summary of the group 1 work. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I think with that, if you have any different opinion about the points listed, please go ahead and just write those in the chat box. I think we move to group 2. I know there is a question, but we'll have a section to address those. So group 2, please welcome.
Thanks, and I've been volunteered for presenting out for group 2. So our pitfall was on responding late with seeds, often after farmers have planted. So we had, for why this pitfall happens, kind of a lack of assessments or need identification that happens late, or we heard from USAID the comment that there's oftentimes not assessments written into applications, and so, or in the application it says we'll do an assessment once the program has started, but by then there's very little time to get and procure seeds before farmers need them. Another comment or discussion was around poor planning, not considering the cropping calendar of the area, procurement and logistical concerns within organizations, as well as with the donor, like delayed approval from donor, delayed delivery from ships. So a lot of conversation about both planning and then also the inevitable delays that will happen. And so then some of the moving forward or what can be done differently, definitely doing the early seed assessments so that our application for approval can be done earlier. And yeah, understanding where seed exists. So establishing a network of seed suppliers with the required varieties, understanding who has what. And yeah, I think those are kind of the main discussion points were really around needing to plan ahead of time and understand the cropping calendar and the preferences to be able to know where seeds are, and the planning for the procurement processes to get them into the hands of farmers on time. But anyone from group 2 want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just have a comment. This is Stanley.
Sure.
This is Stanley. I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Stanley.
Yes, I'm looking at the pitfall, and I'm looking like, I'm thinking like, are we talking about responding late with seed often after farmers are planted, or when the planting season has gone? Because ideally, if farmers already have seed to plant, then it may not really even make sense in the first place to respond with seeds. That's the first comment. The other comment is on one of the reasons for this pitfall may be looking at the current climate change and how the seasons are switching. Then if maybe the program does not consider issues of climate information, then they may end up responding when maybe the season has already started. Over.
Yeah, Stanley, on your first question, I think we are talking about syncing seed response to planting time. That is the basic thing. Are we able to beat what I would say the deadline for farmers to have the seed when they need it, and when the rains are starting and they need to plant? That is the whole essence of this. And often what happens is a seed comes after the planting time has passed. So I think that that is the explanation. So we move to group 3. If of course, we'll have time to delve deeper into those discussions, Stanley. So we move to group 3.
Group 3, we volunteered, I think, Stanley to help us. Stanley, please.
Yeah, so thank you, Waso. Yeah, well, I want to say that we were not able really to go through the entire work that we wanted. I think it took a lot of time for us really to get to discuss many points, but all the same, I want to quickly go through what we came up with. And here we are looking at why is it that there is low recognition that farmers are also good seed managers, and often development partners never build on their skills. One of the reasons is due to time. You find that most of the program doesn't really have enough time to do initial seed assessment to be able to appreciate the farmers' knowledge and be able to understand the context in which the farmers are operating. The other point is on the issue of no previous assessment is done before the actual distribution. Most of the policies, particularly government policies and also donors, only recognize formal seed producers, and therefore the farmers are never recognized as good seed managers. And in some cases, you'll find that donors are very strict in terms of the sourcing of the seed, and this is basically connected to quality related compliance requirements. The other reason is lack of or poor storage facilities amongst the farmers. The other very important point is on the attitude. Most of the humanitarian and development workers actually tend to think, or they have that attitude that farmers cannot be good managers. Moving forward, we only got 3 points. These are, of course, doing a seed system assessment before the actual seed distribution interventions, and also work with the farmers to build their skills. This, of course, is also connected to the assessment, the seed system assessment. And finally, working with the policy makers, basically to review some of these policies that only recognize formal seed production systems. Over and back to you.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for taking time to go through this. I guess for now, we want to move to the next level. We'll have a discussion session where we can address some of the concerns. But we'll move to, Ashton, if you can take me to slide number 14, so that we sort of capture just the 3. Just to let you know that we'd like your thoughts on all of these, starting from pitfall number 1. Although we are going to look at the 3 pitfalls that we discussed in the groups, we want your thoughts on all of them, and we'll share the slides so that you look at some of the reasons why this happened, and how do we move forward in terms of what can be done differently. So you'll have all of those in the slides. They're complete. So you'll give your thoughts for all of them, but we are going to look at the 3 that we have discussed for today. And so we start with number 4. the pitfall number 4, assuming that all seed must be certified and that all farmer seed is poor quality. And often this happens because there's that assumption that all seed must be certified. Of course, there is the attitude that, of course, certified seed is of better quality than farmer seed. And I saw this, of course, come up from the presentation by group 1, and it clearly corroborates our assertion that we need to sort of figure out and think about all seed sources in terms of what do farmers do with their seed. Other than the certification process in the formal system, farmers have their own ways of doing quality control. And so in terms of moving forward, again, I saw this in the presentation by group 1, that we need to look at the processes and sort of decentralize these certification processes so we can have mini certification processes and always try to describe the process by which quality is assessed so that it doesn't leave out the farmer's seed. But also it's important, if you are doing either certified or farmer seed, do a quick germination tests, because this will then give you a quick results of whether the quality is acceptable. And for certified seed, often it is good to do germination test, but also check the dates of expiry. And sometimes, like in some countries, we have codes where you can send a text, you can send a code to a number, and then you get a feedback to confirm that the seed is of good quality. And also it's important to like just ask the history of transport, how it was stored, and so on, so that you are able to like do traceability, tracing of the seed to the source, and you are able to like ascertain the quality. And for informal sources, of course, there is a need to do seed sampling and also germination tests, but also you have to do visual inspections. And I think farmers are good at this. They do a lot of quality control activities. And you can also contact key informants within the locality, especially where seed is produced in the community. And having good discussion with participants and getting their sense of what seeds, what quality their seeds are like is also very critical. I'll move to the next pitfall before we get to the discussion, and that's pitfall number 6, slide number 17. Thanks a lot, Ashton. So late response is quite, I think, synonymous with organizations. And I think it's perhaps more because of the planning aspect of it. And this is where I think Stanley was asking about, is it late response after farmers have planted? I agree with you that would make no sense. It is sinking seed supply to the start of the season when farmers really need the seed. And often this happens with DSD because direct seed distribution has no typical timeline. And it depends on various reasons. We could have availability of seed, whether that seed is available locally or not. If you need to outsource seed, then it will take even longer to procure that seed. And sometimes organizational policies on quality can determine whether you're going to get seed quickly and distribute it when the farmers need it or not, but also in terms of how much seed is required. more seed would obviously require more time to procure. But again, in terms of the length of time, this will largely depend on the type of distribution that you want to adopt, whether it is cash or voucher, whether it's restricted voucher, some could use accommodative vouchers and seed fairs and so on. So there are a lot of things that you want to really consider. And then looking at how do we go around this? And in essence, if you select to do a direct seed distribution, you have to really look at the timeline for that. And giving a rough figure of 8 to 10 weeks. And then so planning your time so that within those 8 to 10 weeks, you are able to do your procurement processes, you have planned for distribution, you are able to meet the planting time. But we have suggested some clear steps here, and this would just help to guide your thoughts on how to plan the distribution, the procurement and distribution. You have to look at the markets and see what seeds are available in terms of the seed that is available within the locality, but also looking at are there vendors who can be able to supply that seed, and thinking of agreements and signing those, and of course receiving seed supply and then the actual dissemination. So if you can break it down and be able to plan yourself early enough, we think that can help a lot in trying to overcome this pitfall. So let's move to number 8 finally. That's slide 20. So often we do not recognize farmers as good seed managers, and we don't sort of put much effort in building their skills because of that aspect of not recognizing the ability to sort of produce good quality seed. And I think it came out from group 3 very clearly that there are those attitudes, but also policy issues that would then make it difficult for us to trust farmer seeders being of good quality. But those are the things we need to deal with. And in terms of way forward, I think the most important thing is to sort of look at the entirety of farmer seed system and assess the quality control practices. I once did this, and I was shocked at how farmers are capable to maintain seed quality, especially for their legumes, because most farmers essentially receive or have their seeds sourced from their own stocks. And so if we can appreciate these traditional seed management practices and then reinforce their skills in things like seed selection, things like storage, things like treatment of their seeds in their own manner, then we are able to sort of overcome this challenge or pitfall. So with that, I think I will usher us into a brief session of questions and discussion. And we'll have a couple of minutes for this. So if there is any question that you want to raise on the floor, I would be happy to give you that chance to.
Alfred, there are quite a few questions in the comment box. So from Elaine, as a development project, are we in the right role when we distribute uncertified seed? So I don't know if folks have thoughts on that. If anyone wants to speak to that. There's also a question from Carl, how do we ascertain the varietal purity if you're sourcing from informal markets?
Yeah, I'm happy to try to respond to any questions. Stephen Walsh here, I just signed on.
Thanks a lot, Steve. And I think the first question actually is within your scope. Zabo is asking, as a development project, are we the right role when we distribute uncertified seed? I didn't quite get the flow of the Zabo. Do you want to just ask your question?
Yes, I think the question is clear.
Yeah,
all right.
I guess.
So the question is, as a development project, are we in the right role when we distribute uncertified seed? All right,
well,
go ahead,
yeah,
Steve.
I guess, I mean, the first question is, what do the farmers need and want? And that question has to be addressed. I will say that we also need to ask ourselves, you know, what are we getting when we're getting certified seed? And I make that statement from the standpoint of having looked at certification processes in a number of countries and seen that actually there's almost no traceability back to early generation seed. So, you know, I mean, what underlines nearly all certification processes that are like ISO 9000 certified is this custodial nature, i.e. the seed can clearly be traced back to early generation seed, so that we know, you know, we know without a doubt its parentage. And so you know, my intention here is not to cast aspersion at certified seed, but rather highlight that certified seed is not magical, in that you can have something that's called certified, yet it's not appropriate for farmers. It's the variety's not adapted to farmers. Even you can get certified seed that it may be certified, but physiologically, by the time it reaches farmers, it's no longer of decent quality. So it's sort of in that respect that I would say, you know, if the seed is not certified, that's okay. But per our guidelines, we ask partners to follow and document quality assurance practices, which include, but are not limited to, making an attestation that the variety itself is adapted and appropriate for the farmers, some form of physiological assessment, which, you know, would include a simple germination test, some basic assessment of the purity, you know, so, you know, ensuring that, you know, if there's material in there that's, you know, off type, that it's separated out. So I think this, you know, may also get perhaps at Carl's question about how do we ensure or assure or take due diligence steps when it comes to informal seed. My answer is the same, that, you know, we can take steps to ensure that if seed is procured in a local market, we're procuring seed and not grain. And, you know, without sort of verbatim repeating earlier work by Sperling, we know that traders clearly make a distinction between what they're maintaining for seed versus what's held for grain. And so, I mean, this has been clearly demonstrated that the traders themselves will often, you know, identify something as for seed, and that, you know, what does that actually mean? It may mean that they stored it differently, but it often means some form of triage or separating out better quality seed from what otherwise may be like broken or slightly physiologically not like 100% pieces, if you will, that are more more or could be fine for a food. So I'll just leave it at that, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide some thoughts here. Over.
Good, thanks a lot, Steve. And I think one question I would like probably Luis to address is about Carl. How do you ascertain analytical varietal purity if you are sourcing seed from informal markets? Luis, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear all of you, and I find this discussion very important and interesting. So thank you. From formal markets, what you can hope for is seed at least as good as farmers normally use. If you do a good triage, some good germination, free of stones and pebbles, you won't get necessarily variety purity. One has to ask, is that the most important thing for farmers? Because farmers themselves often mix varieties to get stability, or they themselves, looking at the phenotype, the grain, they can sort out which varieties they want to sow and which not. The great thing about markets is that you normally get varieties that farmers actually want. And then again, they can sort which grain types to plant and which not, which happens everywhere in the world. So Carl, it's a good question. I know it's provocative, but you're not going to get variety purity, but you get variety choice, and sorting can take place.
Good, thanks a lot, Luis. And of course, just one more again for you, Luis or Steve, or whoever wants to take this. Just quickly, how does seed certification work in fragile context in which there is weak seed institutions and farmers are dependent on seed aid?
Steve, someone else from BHA, anyone, even in the audience, we have great seed experts here. Anyway, let me start, and then I want to make a comment, if you don't mind, Wilfred. Seed certification is hard even in stable contexts. It's hard even to get last mile seed that's certified. So obviously, there's a very big discussion, Joseph, I guess it's Joseph, on how do you start to decentralize quality assurance procedures. So the answer to your important question is there are challenges to make it work. So we have to think about alternatives. How do you decentralize quality assurance? How do you set in the capacity to look at quality seed when you don't have a central government that works? Good, lots of good stuff written on this. If you want to contact me, I can help. Wilfred, you're good at this too. Why don't you comment? Yep.
Yeah, I think perhaps we'll continue this conversation in the interest of time, because there are a couple of questions. So let's move to the next section, and then we can perhaps throw in any responses. I see Steve has done so. So I'll do the same to that question and others. But at this point, perhaps let's move to the next section. And with that, I will hand it over to Luis to take us through tools for seed systems assessments.
Yeah, guys, thank you for this interesting discussion. Just to wrap up, I wonder if we should add what our suggestions were. That's what Wilfred drafted at the end, versus your suggestions on moving forward, and maybe issue this scale as a separate information document. These are the common pitfalls we find. These are why they occur. This is the way for moving forward. So just to say, I think we're creating a way to move forward if we analyze these more fully. And please add in the Google Doc common pitfalls that we didn't mention. So we only had 8, maybe you have others. Anyway, we can discuss this again at the end, where we have recommendations and next steps. But I found this discussion really useful. Okay, what I'm supposed to be doing here, tools for SSA, seed system assessment. Next slide, please, Ashton. So as we discussed last session, there are at least 3 extensive websites that have tool development, and I hope you've looked at all of them by now. Seed System, FAO has some really interesting stuff, and S34D has a Google Drive, and they continue to develop. Tool development is continuous. It's not finite. Please add in the Google, if you know, on the chat, if you know other websites you'd like us to look at. Ashton, next, please. So what I've tried to do here, and I think it's the first time it's ever been done, is to just quickly compare these 3 tool sets. And what I noticed in trying to do this is how similar they are in the broad brush. So if you take actors, all 3, Seed System, FAO, and S34D, are actor-based assessments. That is, they go stakeholder by stakeholder and determine if there's need and supply. So each one has community groups and women's groups. Don't forget the women. Has household interviews, looks at markets, formal, informal, looks at key informants, has gender and vulnerability experts. All 3 do that. Second, in terms of process, all 3 currently are done in teams. That is, you send teams onto the ground to interface with the stakeholders. At this point, to my knowledge at least, there is no format that's an individual expert going in. So send an expert to go in, have him or her find the answer and come out. No format exists for the rigor of that kind of assessment. In terms of languages, I think you can see, I hope you can see the screen. English, French, limited Arabic for Seed System, FAO, English, French, Spanish. S34D, it says English, I'm pretty sure it's French also, but I would encourage any of you to contact implementers, because often tools have been translated in other languages, but they're not on the websites. So for instance, I know for Seed System, we worked in Timor-Leste, so we have all the tools in Portuguese, just for instance. In terms of availability, where can you find the tools? I'm really just going down the rows so we look at them. All of them are online. Having said that, right now S34D has its Google Drive. Seed System also has an e-course. FAO has them in printed and CD form. So if you can't get online and you can't download them, there's actually a printed booklet, very unique. Sample sizes, this is the only big difference I can see among the 3. So for instance, sample sizes for household interviews, Seed System and FAO say you have to do 60 to 80 to have rigor. S34D has a slightly different recommendation, much smaller sample size. In terms of format, all are in paper. I know that Seed System and S34D have also gone to digital. And then finally, in terms of where you can find the reports, you can read the bottom line. Seed System, they're posted routinely. FAO has some really good ones, but only a few online. Right now, S34D is thinking where it should put them, and they're discussing the UN Food Security Cluster. So this is just a broad brush to give you an idea of the commonalities and differences, but most of them are common. Next, please. Our view as facilitators is that we're not recommending one tool set over another. What we're recommending, and we would like you to help us with, is to say any tool set you use has to meet a minimum set of standards. So that's where we are. Look at the tool set, and let's go now to minimum standards. But before I go to minimum standards, does anyone have a burning question or comment? Good. Okay, let's go to minimum standards. And I hope I'm not going too fast or slow. You guys guide me. So minimum standards for seed system assessment. And again, just to reiterate, we use seed system assessment as the generic. You know, whether you want to use RSSA or SSSA or seed security assessment, that's all fine with us. It's just do a generic, do a seed system assessment. That's what's important at this stage. Okay, next, please. So minimum standards for seed system assessment. What has been the rationale for this? And the rationale is that if you take the time to do an assessment, we all want to make sure that it's valid, that it has delivered real results. So how do we give guidance on what a quote real rigorous assessment might look like? Minimum standards were first talked about and developed over a 3-year period. And you see it's relatively new, from 2017 to 2020. So they really just came out. I don't know if you all know them, at least before this co-learning course. The process, to be very honest, it was a group of individual experts, seed system interested people from seed system, FAO, and what used to be then US OFDA, but BHA, who got together and said, wow, we're getting all these proposals that are really junky. How do we give better guidance? And these individual people, some of who are on this call, reviewed documents for 2.5 years and then issued them, but there was no public consultation, not until right now. Okay, ask questions at any point, guys. Okay, so you received, prior to today's session, an outline of the minimum standards as they exist. You also received in detail the 6 pages of what was expected in the outline. And I hope that most of you, or some of you at least, have printed these out so you can see them easily, but they're also, are they in the chat box?
I'll post them right now, Louise.
Thanks ever so much, Abby. So basically the minimum standards, the outline only has 12 elements. You know, it's not this huge undertaking. And it would seem to be the elements in any rigorous process, but we want you to decide that and to discuss this. So let me just read so we're clear here. The first framing elements is that there should be a description of the disaster or stress. Okay, think of this as you're doing your field work and you're writing the report. Is this reasonable to ask? Is this reasonable for the donor now to use this checklist, or your program manager to use this checklist to say if your work is rigorous? Okay, number 2, you have to specify the rationale for a seed security assessment. Why are you doing this? Was there a drought? Is there a war? Was there pest damage? Why do you think you should do the assessment? What was the trigger? You have to describe the place you did it, And then, probably also the results are extrapolable to where, this place, why was it chosen? When you did the assessment, post-harvest, pre-harvest, to give an idea of how valid the findings are. And then for the framing elements, there are always some background work. So how many agricultural seasons does this community have? What seed systems do they normally use? What are their variety and crop preferences? I mean, really basic stuff that you as agronomists or farming system specialists or economists would know. So those are the only framing elements. Then in the content, they're just another set from 6 to 12. What were the methods or processes? How was the assessment done? How was the analysis done? The field evidence, what evidence do you have for farmer need or demand? The field evidence from the supply side, stocks from which channels. Remember last session, we spent a lot of time on demand and supply. So you guys have a sense of what goes in that content of the assessment. Number 9, critical indicators, if there are problems or constraints. What were the indicators? What'd you use? Indicators if there are development opportunities. Why did you choose the response if there are responses? And then number 12, as a minimum standard, you have to write the report up and put it in the public domain. So that's all it is right now. So what we'd like you to do, and I'll take questions before we go into groups, is we would like you to go into groups and look at the outline of the minimum standards. And these are kind of really serious commitments and suggestions from you who are being asked, should they be used? And the breakout groups are 3 minutes. I'm sorry, there are 3 breakout groups. Basically, what we'd like you to think about, and we do consider this very serious activity, is do you agree with having the idea of minimum standards? Among the 12, are there ones you want removed? Why? Among the 12, are there ones you want added? And why? Okay, Abby, should we break into groups? I think you have to, at this point, assign a facilitator, assign a note taker. Can we show the Google Doc itself? So when you break into groups, this is really an open discussion. We're not constraining you. Do you agree with the idea? What should be removed? What should be added? That's it. But very, very important to get your feedback. Okay, are there any questions? Should we break up? Abby?
Yep, all good.
All good. So Abby has given you a room to join. Quickly choose a facilitator. So many of you are good facilitators. Choose a note taker, and your honest feedback is really needed. Let's go.
Hi, everyone. Are you with me?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, we are with you.
Great. So just from Luis's comment, we are back in our Google Doc, and we are on activity 3. So page, what group are we? We are group 2. So we are on page 8 of the Google Doc that I just put into our chat box. And we need a facilitator and a note taker. I'm happy to be one of them because I know you guys have been doing a lot.
I'm happy to take notes. This is Ina.
Hi, Ina. Thank you. Okay, well then I can facilitate. So I think the general question is, hopefully you guys had a chance to look at the minimum standards. And if not, hopefully Luis's brief overview was helpful, or you may already have them printed out or nearby. But our first question to discuss is really just like, do we agree with the concept of having minimum standards? You know, there's this document that's been endorsed by FAO, Seed System, USAID, OFTA, BHA, and it's the Seed System Assessment Minimum Technical Standards and Critical Elements. It's like, our small group here, do we think that's a good idea to have minimum standards for seed assessments, seed system assessments? Basically, yes or no. And if no, maybe we talk a little bit about why not.
I think they're a good
Let
idea.
me start.
Please do.
Yeah, just I'm saying yes, minimum standard is important because so as to initiate the process with some triggers clearly. That's it's very important. Second, to also protect the farmers, the community, because we are putting that minimum standard at least to protect those vulnerable who cannot protect themselves. So we need to put that minimum standard, and also good to put minimum standard to avoid duplication of effort and resource, and also for harmonization. We need minimum standard. Just for starting, I will come to Zaza. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Berhanu, for getting us started. Hold on, let me, what do others think? I know you had mentioned something at the start about you also agreed.
Yes, I didn't provide reasons, but I like that they are that they appear to be relative. I think it's good to have simple, adaptable standards. I think that's very helpful.
Hmm. Yeah,
and
thanks,
sorry,
Aina.
I was just getting the document open. Did I capture your point, the earlier point sufficiently? You had said good for clarification, and there were two other reasons that I didn't write down.
Berhanu, you mentioned something about, you know, kind of protecting farmers, like if we're working with communities.
Yeah, to protect farmers or the most vulnerable for
Okay.
harmonization. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Can I come in?
Sure.
Okay, I also agree that we need to have minimum standards, but probably we might need to be a little bit clear or to have standards for formal seed systems and non-formal seed systems. So that would give us some guides when we want to also utilize both systems, seed from both systems. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And yeah, just so we make sure we have about 5-6 minutes left. So just to make sure we get to some of these other questions about, like, if we're saying generally we agree that there should be standards, you know, in the list that is currently in the minimum standards, which Louise shared, and hopefully you guys can see on my screen now. I'm scrolling through the full document. But are there ones that you looked through and said, okay, this seems out of scope, or like too much work when we're in an emergency, we have so much going on? Yeah, are there things that you feel like you would want removed from that, or do you feel like all of them are appropriate of the 12 that Louise talked about? But one of the things I would have added in part 5, which is about the context, background work, I would probably have added something about the policies context. Is there any policy, any plan from the government on some agricultural development they want to promote? Could be interesting.
Thanks, Joanne. Alain, I see your hand is up.
Yes, just to have that minimum standard can allow us to make comparison, to have scientific results and to make comparison.
Thank you. That's a great addition. Yeah.
Do you mean comparisons between different different assessments, or comparisons between formal and informal systems?
Between different regions.
Ah, okay.
In the country, we can have a various regions, and if you have said assessment in different regions, you must have result. I can say result, comparable result.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Berhanu, is there something you feel like would be added or removed?
Okay, just 2 points simply. One, topic place, I'm not that much comfortable. It narrows the assessment. So I prefer to put it scope, because it shows the overall geographic, demographic, and agroecologic, because that is one. If it is place, it narrows. The second one, no need to separately do field evidence for demand and later on with other topic to supply. So for seed security, we can do it jointly, the demand and the supply side, or we can put it in the that way. That is 1 point. Finally, on the response, adding long-term response. I am observing short-term in the media, like we can think of strategically to develop the seed sector with long-term planning. So those are my points. Over to you.
I didn't. Can you summarize the first point again?
My first point in the topic, it says place. So like in the seed security assessment, place narrows the description of that assessment. When you say place, I'm thinking just a specific town or something. So it is good to put a scope of assessment which can incorporate, which can gives you more information. Just change of the word, remove place and
yeah, that makes sense for Hanu. So calling it place is a bit limiting, but maybe reframing it as the scope of the assessment, which would include the location, but also the agroecological zones and other things as described.
Perfect.
And then I think your other point was basically combining the supply and demand field evidence. Is that right?
Yes. Rather than putting separately, we can see the interaction from where they are getting the seed, the different channels, and where they are selling. So we can see together the interaction of the demand and supply.
Great. Okay, Zoe, we have 1 minute left. Over to you.
I'm wondering if you can add the sector, the private sector engagement and the public sector engagement in terms of how are they engaged in the seed security system assessment for one country, for example?
Great, thanks, Zoe. I think Ina has captured that. All right.
I'm wondering just briefly if it's possible to, and I haven't maybe it's covered already, but if it's possible to help people think about, I mean, we've got minimum standards, but then again, how deep does one go into all these different aspects? What's sort of a light rapid assessment versus a more in-depth assessment? Because if you go to FAO guidance or formalized seed sector guidance, you know, the reports can be 50 pages long, you know, but when we say minimum standard, these are the categories of things to cover, but in what degree of depth? And there's a reference at the end about being professionally written up. So like, what does that mean? So two additional questions, I guess.
Yeah, please add those, Ina.
Yeah.
Joanne?
Yeah, I would also, I think in the part 6 where they talk about focus on also like the other essential accompanying inputs, I think land tenure can also be something that need to be looked at when you're talking about seeds. In some context, it can be very constraining as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think Ina has added that in. Okay, we're about to get put back in the main group, but thanks everyone for your contributions, and I'll see you on the other side.
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, that's
thank you.
Hi everyone, we're back in the main group now. I know some of you are rapidly still trying to add notes into your box, which is great. It means there was an active discussion when we got cut off. So I think I wanted to start the debrief of this just asking, you know, did any group feel like there should not be minimum standards? I know group 2 felt like it was really good for you know, comparison between different countries, good for clarification, protecting farmers and the most vulnerable that we're working with, that it's a good idea to have standards. Did groups 1 or 3 have anything different, or did you guys feel like also thumbs up, standards are important?
Yeah, I think from group 1, it's all thumbs up for the minimum standards, except there is one question about why call them minimum standards as opposed to just standards. That's the question that came from the group. Otherwise, I think there was near unanimity that the minimum standards are good for seed assessments.
How about group 3? Were you also on board with the idea? And then we'll get into kind of the addition, subtraction. Who was in group 3? Yep,
I think we lost our moderator, Joanne. But so group 3, please chime in. I think we're group 3. Is that the idea was there should be minimum standards, but again, why are we calling them minimum? So that same comment was raised. Yep.
Great, good to know. Okay, so then we got in, I'm glad we're all on board with the idea of standards or minimum standards. But then for group 1, were there any that you talked about from the 12 that are there that you would recommend adding or subtracting? Maybe just a few points from each group.
Yeah, a few things were recommended from group 1, and I will welcome the members to contribute, because I think some of the points were accidentally deleted when one of us was typing. So one of the things was the issue of gender, that gender should sort of be included in all the standards. And there was the thing about seed system security mapping, which I would like our brother to comment on. Please go ahead. I know you agreed to expound on this, the mapping.
Yeah, thank you very much. So someone is deleting, don't know.
Yeah,
so
Ashton, are you taking things away?
Sorry, I think there was confusion. So Luis and Ashton, our group was technically group 1. And so we were taking notes under group 1, but I think there was some confusion between 1 and 3. So I was trying to move our points down to 3, but then I saw that there are points on 3. So I'm just going to put it back. Sorry.
All good.
I like that, Ashton. You brought them back. I think that's nice. So we have all of them. But let's move on with our brother who was commenting.
I'm on a call.
So the comment I was doing is seed security mapping. So I think that in most of the assessments in the previous years that in one way or another we've been conducted, we find it very useful once the assessment has been done in a specific geographic area. We have identified the different points, the different area that seed is available, and also we have identified seed available and seed quality, and also the different channel that a farmer used to be to have access to source their own seeds. It will be good to systematically produce that a mapping that can guide, that can give a broader view of the system, of the seed system within that geographic area. So yeah, let's think to say about it, but we think that globally we find it very useful in most cases to have a broader view of the system within a specific geographic area. Over to you.
Thanks, Sadhu.
Good. And then I think finally there was a recommendation to add a preface on quality seed. And I guess, Steve, you had some very good comments. Please go ahead and share those.
That might have been my comment.
Oh,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, Carl.
And we didn't get a chance to finish that, and it wasn't well formed, but I've seen a few seed security assessments where they start with number 11, which is, here's our response. And, and then they build the seed security assessment kind of to justify that response, which is, you know, people do not have, and I've seen this in Kenya, I've seen this in a few other countries where it's people do not have access to, and this was specifically in hybrid maize seed varieties. And so the seed security assessment was predicated on that. And I think it's kind of, this is maybe my question, it's a little amorphous or just something to say, is how do we make sure that that language is in there that that states that quality seed is not necessarily hybrid or formal seed. It can be, you know, it can be these informal seed sources. It can be farmers' own saved seed. That's just something I wanted to kind of put out there, just because I've seen seed assessments that are written that way. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, I just wanted to move us on so we make sure to hear from each group. Ashton Q, thanks a lot, group 1 or group 3, whichever number you actually were. Thanks so much for sharing. Ina, do you want to give a few points from our group since you are a note taker?
Sure. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, So overall, as Abby mentioned, we thought that having some kind of minimum standards was very good for clarification. It protects farmers and the most vulnerable and can help harmonize across actors. It's great when they can be a little bit adaptable and they're simple and straightforward. And we need them to be clear in the application for formal versus informal systems and support utilization of both. We also noted that they allow for comparisons between different regions of a country, which can be very helpful. And when it's a little bit standardized, or they, we could at least know that the same components are going to show up in different assessments. Some of the suggestions for additions or changes is that perhaps in the background section, including policy, what might be promoted, including suggestions for longer term responses, and also helping to maybe clarify. I think there's a question, or in the context, it refers to where the place where the assessment might be conducted. We'd like to have that maybe clarified to cover location as well as, or refer to location as well as agroecological zones. So maybe it's more about scope than place. We want, sorry, is there a question there? No. Okay. So we also want to maybe think about linking or combining some of this field evidence from supply and demand to make sure that there's an opportunity to elaborate the interaction between that, because it's always a dynamic. They're not static necessarily. And making sure, perhaps adding a reference to or clarify that it's good to both identify the private and public sector engagement. Note if land tenure issues are a factor, because sometimes this can be constraining. And then we had a couple of questions about is there a way in the minimum standards to indicate the range or the depth of analysis, or the range of depth of analysis? Sometimes people have a lot of money and time, sometimes they don't have much money and time. So what meets the minimum in that regard? Is it really about having something that addresses each component? And to what degree is the range that the depth of response is essential? And finally, there's a reference to a professional write-up. Maybe that could be characterized to indicate what might be meant. Over.
Thanks a lot, Ina. That was a very good summary. Let's move to group 3. Was this Ashton and Luisa's group's note?
Okay, well, let me butt in here. We had people coming in and out. It was a very dynamic group. I don't think this is my group, but I'm very happy to read unless someone else wants to read.
Go for it, Louise.
Good. So generally, they agreed the need for minimum standards, and this happened across groups, but I think we should rename minimum standards. Risk analysis is needed. Wow, excellent. Environmental impacts, conflict sensitivity. You guys are getting into the content. Safety issues. Need to include gender perspective. Each proposed to combine 1 and 2, which is disaster stress and the justification for the SSA, and level of qualification for a person to do this. So I read someone else's group. Does anyone from this group want to add? And then we can wrap up with something really important. Anyone want to add to this who was in this group? Okay, Abby, can I chime in here?
Yep, take over.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of thanks, everybody. A lot of great suggestions. Remember, you looked at the outline. I would suggest you also look at the 6 pages of detail, because much of what you've recommended, we're going to have to add there. Really great suggestions. Just briefly, I want to think about process, how to move these forward. Remember, first round, we had a few key people from 3 agencies agree. UN agency and SEED system and USAID. moving forward, how should we work on these? So for instance, I'm going to make one suggestion, but then I want to hear from you. So for instance, should we have a technical group within Scale take these forward? So what do we do now for the process? Just brainstorm. Anyone who wants to raise a hand. Abby, you can see hands better than I. What would be a process for moving this forward?
And by moving this forward, Luis is mentioning, like, if we're going to modify the minimum standards or adjust, the additions, subtractions that you guys just talked about, or adjustments to them, how would we go about that? Scale is one convening body in a way, bringing implementers together. Do we have a role to play in that? Are there other ideas for how we might carry a process of adjusting these forward? And then socializing them and getting them, bought into.
So I see no hands. Are there any hands, Abby? I would suggest that you guys need more time to think about this. We kind of threw a lot at you very quickly. Maybe we can discuss this at the beginning of next session to give you time to think about how do we move forward, should be together or separately, etc. So let's take this to the next section so you have more time to think. Abby, over to you.
Thanks, Luis. Yeah, I think that's a good idea for us to talk about it next session. And maybe it's something that you can talk about with some of your colleagues who might be engaged in SSAs or in proposals, who may have additional thoughts on additions or things that might be removed or consolidated, additional information that you might need to put these into practice. So that, the beginning of next session, we can take a few minutes just so that Scale has ideas for our way forward. So Ashton, I think we're on, slide 50. So Stanley has a proposal nominating a small team to consolidate the proposals and propose a way forward in the next session. So interesting, Stanley, are you saying like a subset of the people on this call would talk over the next week and then come with some ideas? Stanley, feel free to unmute.
Yes, Abby, I thought maybe because we have quite a number of proposals, recommendations from today's assignment, we could probably have a smaller team that can consolidate and make sense of the proposals and probably give some direction in the next session.
Yeah, thanks, Stanley. I think that's a good idea. Maybe even broader than this group, or thinking, broader than just this week to next week. Maybe it is a subset of people from different organizations who are digging into these, sourcing ideas from different colleagues. And then, but I think that's a really good step to consider. So representation from different implementing partners. Carl, I see your hand is raised as well.
Just as a thank you, and I really appreciate us having this discussion. And I just want to kind of add as a recommendation or a suggestion is, who are we targeting with this and who are we targeting these standards at? Because I think, just to go back to my comment on when we were talking about late seed delivery, right now we're among friends and we're among practitioners and people who work with seeds and know a lot about seeds, know a lot about farmers and seed systems. I think one of our target audiences really needs to be the people who are in charge of procurement and making sure that systems directors and systems managers and the upper echelon of, say, for example, NGOs are clearly aware of these things, so they can, I think sometimes we have to move that conversation beyond we're doing direct distribution of seed, it's okay, it's always worked, yada, 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 and really start to enact that change so there's more space to do these, I think, innovative and more locally appropriate mechanisms for seed delivery. I hope that makes sense. Because, you know, I do know there's a tendency, like I'm a big conservation agriculture person. Wilford may remember that from Zambia. And, you know, I tend to gravitate towards things about conservation agriculture. You know, you have people who are maybe seeds and programmatic experts really engaging with this, but they may not be the people we need to change, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. That's a very good point, Carl. So yeah, I think let's, you guys take the next week to mull this over a bit more. And our hope is that by the end of the learning group, we have an idea for next steps around this. But recognizing that we're 1 minute until we finish, just a quick summary from today. We actually did not get to the last point on planning an SSA, but we will get into that next session. We did dig into some common pitfalls. And as Wilford mentioned in the presentation that I'll share just after the session, you can look through all 8 of them, where we've put together some of the why this happens and suggestions for moving forward to get out of that pitfall. But feel free to read through that, add comments on the presentation or the Google Doc if you have additional things you want to share. Louise took us through a comparison of the 3 different SSA tools from FAO, S34D, and seed system. And then we've just been digging a bit into the minimum standards and getting your thoughts on those. Next slide, Ashton. In preparation for next week, which is our final session, it's hard to believe this month has flown by. But we are spending next week, we'll talk about the SSA process that we didn't get to today. We'll also revisit the kind of next steps for adjusting minimum standards. But then we also want to spend next week talking about upcoming SSAs, RSSAs that you have, you know, and what kind of additional support or needs you may have to being able to conduct that. So if you have one upcoming, please be prepared to share when, the country, any questions or concerns or comments you want to make about it. And then think hard, maybe ask your colleagues about the needs and gaps you have related to seed systems assessment, so that, yeah, as we're leaving the group next week, we have additional ideas for Scale. Scale is going to have a follow-on award, so we have additional time, space, money to support BHA implementing partners. And seed system is definitely a topic area that we're keen to stay engaged with and continue supporting partners in. And I know BHA is also invested in supporting the IPs in this way. And then just a reminder that we have our shared Google Doc that you guys have been in all session. Feel free to continue adding questions, recommendations towards the bottom. There's those boxes that you can add to. But in general, thanks so much for your participation. As always, we really appreciate it and look forward to next week. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.